wouldn't it be interesting if we brought some different entrepreneurs, successful young entrepreneurs that have come up with some innovative, interesting and new ideas and brought them here to you from different countries, and that you would have the opportunity then to engage with them and ask them questions. You know, there's really niggly questions about, you know, how did you get finance? How did you get started? What were the main obstacles? What were the main challenges? So that's what I want to do in this panel. And I'm very lucky because I have three very wonderful and successful entrepreneurs. And I'd like you to give them a very warm welcome when they come up onto the stage. So first of all, I'd like to invite Katindi Njonjo from Kenya. A big round of applause. And you'll know why in a moment. And Oscar Ekponimo from Nigeria. Did I do that right? Ekponimo. Great. And Brenda Katwesigye, whoa, from Uganda. Big round of applause, big round of applause. So, I want to go back right to the beginning. Yesterday, we talked a lot about dreams. And the starting point, I think, is a dream. So I'm just going to ask you to answer very briefly, one at a time. Brenda, what was your dream? What was the thing that set you off on your journey? Oh.
Can you hear me? Perfect. I think my dream was to make a difference, to actually live a meaningful life and give back to my society. That's my dream.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oscar?
Okay, well, my dream was to create things that others can benefit from and have people not go hungry because I faced hunger at some point.
You'll tell us about that in a moment.
So I do research and policy analysis using a methodology, or rather using foresight methodologies. And so my dream was to try and get policymakers a bit more excited about policy making, and also then to be a bit more inclusive, to remove their self-interests, or to at least try and include other interests in the policies that they make, and also try and think about how to make policies that are not just reactive, but to make policies that are proactive, because then they make policies using data that is past and present, but to make policies for the future that is volatile, that is for a future that is uncertain, complex, you know, and that usually is a problem in Africa. Okay. And so the idea was to try and get them to be a bit more proactive about that.
Wonderful. A big dream. Brenda, tell us about how you went about fulfilling your dream of making a difference in society.
Yeah, before I tell you about how I did it, I just want to tell you a little bit about my country, where I'm from. From Uganda. It's the Pearl of Africa. You may argue, but it is. And Uganda is a very small country, but it has a population of 41 million people. I know. And I live in Kampala, which is the capital, 1.3 million people in just the capital. We have over 56 tribes in one country. We speak over 100 languages. I only speak 2 of those. But we are a very culturally diverse country. But now when we talk about economics, and as a business person, and I think that's where the drive for my dream came from. When we talk about economics, our GDP is $88 billion US dollars. So I know Apple must be laughing, like, what is 88 billion? But what I'm saying is the rate of unemployment is actually really high. And for a country where 78% of the population is actually below 30, I think you understand where my drive comes from. So I run an enterprise called Wazi Vision. Wazi Vision is a company. It's a plastic recycling company. We actually make eyewear. I would like to ask that you...
It's on.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So we make eyeglasses from recycled plastic. And these are You know the cost of eyewear in Uganda is about $160 US dollars average. It can go below or it can be more, but yes, just a pair. And for me, I think that's ridiculous, really. For something that's very useful, for something that's key. I look in this room and I've seen 1 in every 5 people has a pair of glasses. Yeah? So you know that it's important. And yet people can't afford. So for me, I'm creating something where it's now 80% cheaper than what is actually on the market. And yet, you can see it's good stuff. Yeah? So even through this, I'm creating employment for people like me. And that's my dream, and that's how I'm realizing my dream. Give back to my society, yeah? And still create employment while still creating employment for myself. Yes, thank you.
I think that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So there you go. There's something very unique about your company because you're using recycled materials as well. You're giving back to community. I think these are 2 areas that we need to think about. When we're innovating, we have to think about not just ourselves, not just what we want to do, but what do others need and how can we help them? And how can we do that innovatively? And how can we do that sustainably? And how will we help the environment? And I think this is such a great example. So thank you. Okay, Oscar, over to you. And your slides.
Okay. As Brenda was reeling out the statistics, I was just nodding my head. Well, I come from Nigeria, and we are 180 million. And we have over 250 ethnic groups. And out of that 180 million, over 70% live below the poverty line. Now, my own personal story, I just wanted to share that, like you mentioned earlier on. Growing up, there was this little phase in my family where my mom had to take on the responsibility of looking out for us because my dad was ill and out of work. And the challenge back then was access to quality food. Now, I wasn't starving like the pictures you see in the media with kids, you know, with my ribs showing. No. But access to good, wholesome food was a challenge. And I remember saying that this is something that is dear to my heart and I would like to address in the future. So, enter Chowberry. Chowberry is simply is an app. I would call it a simple app that feeds the hungry. How does that happen? We improve access to quality nutrition and food to communities that are underserved or persons and families that are facing food poverty. And what we do is that we connect supermarkets, grocery stores, merchandisers, food producers, to charities that are feeding hungry people. Our app aggregates data on products that are approaching the end of shelf life from 90 days to the time. And the thing there is that it continues to drop in price and becomes much more affordable. So you may be able to get a box of cereal that usually goes for $10 maybe for as low as $1 because it's expiring in 5 days or in 10 days. And it's been hugely successful. So far, we've impacted in the last year 50,000 households and families. And that is what my dream, that's what I actualized. And we've been, blessed to have the kind of support and reach that we've had so far with Chowberry. And that's me back in the day, a couple of years ago when I was just starting out, talking to the retailers. And this vision had to be moved forward through resilience and persistence and perseverance. And we recently launched a campaign to reach 50,000 people again with wholesome meals because we've moved now into quality food, not just the ones from the supermarket. So we worked with a nutritionist to actually tell us, in this meal pack, this can last a person for 5 days. And it consists of things like soya beans, milk, fish, and all kinds of things. And we're looking to reach the 50,000 mark before World Food Day on October 16.
Wonderful. Big round of applause. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Katindi.
All right, so in 2014, my boss refused to renew my contract, and in 14 days, actually he did this on Valentine's Day, so it was my love letter. Yes, so I had 14 days to figure out what to do with my life. Anyway, fast forward to maybe a month after that, I was all set up. And I started this research policy analysis company. And because I had been privileged to work in such a setting in the work that I was doing, one of the gaps I identified included things like policymakers had the silos, all those challenges that we talked about. And I decided that perhaps bringing in things like storytelling, animations, things like imagery into these policy discussions was a way of humanizing this thing that is very technical, that is very exclusionary, that is very siloed and so forth. So LongView was born then. And basically what we do is to try and look at map different data to look at what the future might hold or what the data is saying about the future, and then try and understand what are the implications of that in today. So that as you make policy, you're putting into consideration those things, because you make policy basically to try and help you work through the future, and yet we never put that as a consideration. So that was interesting. The uptake was very high also because earlier on in my work, I had been involved in a project that looked at the future of Kenya after Moi. For those who know that history, this president was a dictator, and we needed to get him out. So we did that scenario, what we call scenario stories, and there were 4 stories. And it was treasonable to talk about getting the guy out. And I was charged with the responsibility of disseminating that through the country. I was arrested in about 4 areas because they didn't want to hear stories about, when the analysis was done, one of the findings was that we had ingredients, 90 or 95% of the ingredients that cause countries to go into civil war. But when we tried to say that this is a possible scenario for Kenya, everyone was in denial. And the narrative was, we are the peace island in our region because everybody else doesn't have their act together. Anyhow, fast forward 7 years later, the country went actually through 3 of the 4 scenarios. And so everybody kept calling us and saying, we know people who did this before. So scenarios became a way of people to say, we need to be listening a lot more. So some of the projects we have done is, we take topical issues that we think deserve to be mentioned, and we do research around it, and then we do scenarios. So this particular project, and I just want to demonstrate how we use the creatives in the areas that I mentioned to talk about the future. So we organized about 200 young people around the country to talk about the future of Kenya, looking at the youth bulge. And there was this thing about politicians using young people to fight their wars during elections, but no one was really bringing in policies that were helpful. So the first scenario is what we call the tsunami scenario. And in this scenario, young people were saying that Kenya has a possibility of having very high inequality, but also a lot of active participation, because Kenyans are also very democratically aware about their rights. And so in one of the places that is up north that is borders Somalia, the young people there were very angry. And if you look at the first cartoon up there, they were saying that we feel like we don't belong. And so because of the way the government treats us, we are more welcomed by the Al-Shabaab. So the terrorism story was very alive, but the way government was handling it is really by shooting people dead. But by using this cartoon to demonstrate that, it says so many things in just that one picture. At the coast, the young people were very angry, and that's the second picture that has a map of Kenya and a cow. And these young people were saying, look, the coast makes a lot of resources, but all the benefits go to the capital city. So they drew a cow that is being milked in the city center. It's a humorous way of explaining that dilemma. And in this, the lower picture, now I don't know which is right or left, but in the lower picture there, actually, one of the things that came out very interestingly in this scenario was that the future of Kenya, the map of Kenya. So the whole of it is a map of Kenya, but there was talk about secession. And there were groups of young people already coalescing around how do we secede from Kenya. And so this shows the future map of Kenya without, as these people pull out. And I remember presenting this. And so the end of this, that story says, it becomes such a volatile environment that by 2030, Kenya becomes, we become refugees in other countries. I mean, that was a scary story for policymakers. And I remember, although their reaction wasn't what we intended, by the time we did 2 months of disseminating these scenarios, they had dealt with all the secessionist groups in terms of being, the high-handedness and so forth. But it became a national conversation that wasn't being held at the beginning. The second, so this is just what demonstrating what the newspapers might say by 2030. In this scenario, we were saying, look, we have alternatives. By 2017 elections, which was last year, we had actually, in this work, we had actually come up with data that young people below 35 were going to be your biggest voting bloc. And so, depending on what their political consciousness is, they determine who becomes elected. And so our conversation in this scenario was, we all need to belong. We all need to feel like a part of that conversation. And it's a very interesting story, but it's a story of inclusion of young people and other groups as well. This story was talking about, the Pond scenario was talking about where you have a situation in the future where young people are pacified by the government. And we know governments in Africa that do that a lot. And we were looking at what then happens. So there's this structure that is, trying to get people who don't belong out. But then the second picture is very important. It actually is a narrative of African governments pacifying young people through their intelligence, that the education they receive is purposely structured to make sure that they're not functional in the future. And so you have graduates, for example, and that's an interview there of 1 + 1 is 11. So that again was young people saying, look, we need to be conscious about the structural issues that you're using to make us dysfunctional. And in this story, we are saying that by 2030, you have a situation where young people have the effect that HIV had in Southern Africa is the effect that this whole pacification has on young people. So they cannot think for themselves, or they get into drugs and so forth. And the last scenario is where we were saying that you can have a government that works, but you can pacify young people through technology and so forth. But the point is that these stories are meant to elicit very interesting policy conversations. But the most interesting thing is that because there are multiple stories, it's easy for people to listen because several interests are taken care of. And it's easy to sort of get people to act because it's very visual. And I think I'll stop there because I've gone on for so long. But it has been very effective, and I hope we'll talk about the impact of the work that we've had. It's been very effective in terms of getting government to talk about the youth bulge issue in Kenya.
Big round of applause. Another innovative and new enterprise. Now, each of you are working with technologies. Can I ask you a very personal question? Were you trained in the technologies that you're using?
I'll go first. So my CV is very disorganized. So I was trained, and when she was talking about education, I was just very amused because I was trained to be a telecommunication engineer. Yeah. I haven't worked for a telecom since I left the university. And when I was at the university, the guys that came scouting around that had the jobs, actually, were, your guess, I'm sure is very good, one of the big four. The big four is Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, and Ernst & Young. And they were giving jobs to engineers especially because they think we are very brilliant and we learn quickly. So I said, you know what, I need a job. I need to work. And I applied for the job, and I got 2 offers. And I chose one. I worked there for 4 years. And I just realized that, I need to do more. I need to do more. And look at what I'm doing. I'm recycling plastic. I have absolutely no idea how I started doing that. But thank God for technology and thank God for access to material. And also because I work with creative people, I have learned so much within such a short time. I've been running my enterprise for 2 years and I've learned so much. So to answer your question, absolutely no.
It's what I suspected, but I'm amazed that you're doing what you're doing now. And I'm sure there are many other people who are there, but how did you do it? So can we just stay with you for a second, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about how, you've got an idea. Yeah? Where did you get the idea? Well, the idea comes from the need, but was there anything that really...
So I used to have this little book of ideas for all the 4 years that I was working with this firm. So every time I got annoyed by something, I would write it down. So Oscar was laughing at me because he saw my book of ideas in 2013 when we met. And he keeps asking me how many of those ideas have you implemented. So I told him I've only settled with one. So every time I would get upset about something, I would write it down, and then I'd ask myself, can I do something to fix it? And that's where the eye care issue came in. Because everybody that I used to talk to used to come and say, oh my God, my insurance can't even cover this whole pair of glasses. I'm so upset. And I'm thinking, but why are these things so expensive? And that's when I started to do research. And the funniest thing was, in Uganda at least, the frame, which is just the thing that holds the important things, is the most expensive, which makes absolutely no sense. So I figured, what are the economics that are going into these prices? And did you know that there's only one guy, known as Luxottica, that has a monopoly over all eyewear in the world? Pretty much. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and one guy is in charge of that. So you know that the prices are not going down anytime soon, which is why I thought, there should be a way that Africans can actually tap into this. Yeah. We should tap into this, and I think the Chinese are doing this, and I think it's time that we also started to look into developing our own industries and developing our own manufacturing capacity.
Yes. Brenda has just touched on a very, very point that's close to my heart, because I really do believe that we need to become more self-sufficient. Now, I work a lot with food, as I told you before, food and gastronomy, and 70% of the brands on our supermarket shelves in Europe are owned by 10 companies. 70% of the food on our shelves is owned by 10 companies. And of those 10 companies, 8 are American, 2 are British. Which is really frightening, because you don't know it, because you've been using these brands all your life, but they've been since bought by Nestle and Coca-Cola and Lever Brothers. And so I get that. You don't surprise me when you say that. So, this is now a call to arms. It really is a call to arms for artists to meet with the people who can help, because I'm sure you had to go and find the expertise to be able to make glasses. You didn't just dream, I'm going to make some glasses and make them the next day. You had to go and find somebody that would help you make that. Who did you go to first? Who was your mentor?
Great question. So the first person I actually went to was a friend of mine who was in the optical industry, because I knew nothing. All I knew is, okay, I need to do something about this. But I didn't know anything. And he's the one that actually broke down the economics, how much these people are importing these glasses for, how much they're marking them up, how much they're selling, how many people are walking into the stores every day. So you need to have those numbers to be able to make your case for business, okay? So that's the first thing I did, yeah? And then the second thing I did, and this was the hardest thing, because it took me about 8 months, yeah? I had to find the guys that knew how to do it. And believe you me, that was a nightmare, because even the guys that knew how to do it, hey, so how far are we? I'll get back to you in 2 weeks. Hey, so 2 weeks. And we went back and forth because there's not that much expertise in Uganda. And even when you find it, sometimes the work ethic is just not there. So it's been one of my biggest challenges, having the people that can actually do, because it's not my area of expertise, and I had to learn on the job. I had to find out what other people in other industries are doing, how are they doing it. I personally went into plastic places, the people who are already doing recycling and making cups, just to learn how do they do it, and can I apply that technology to this. And it's surprisingly the same technology. It's molding, it's plastic injection, it's product.
Brilliant. Well, I think, this is a really good example of, how you can turn your dream into reality. Yes, you need the support. Yes, you need to go somewhere else for expertise. But if you have the passion and the drive and the wherewithal, then you will do it. So well done. Really well done. I'm going to take the spotlight off you a little bit now and move to Oscar. And a similar question, Oscar. You didn't just wake up one morning and make an app, presumably, or did you?
Oh, no, absolutely not. My background is in technology, actually. I studied computer science, but I don't know if this typifies educational system across Africa. So I studied computer science, but I hadn't known how to use a computer until my second year because the computer lab didn't work. And we were learning things like Pascal, Fortran in my second year. And how did I develop my skills? So in my third year, there was a guy who came to give a talk to our students, to us. And he said, after that talk, if there's any of you who would like to learn technology or have me mentor you, come back to me, reach out to me, because he owned a digital photography studio. So I and 5 of my friends went to him and said, hey, we can help you snap pictures in the weekend, and you can teach us or show us how to code or do anything. And he was so kind. He set up 5 computers for us and said he doesn't have time. He has some ebooks. This was the day of ebooks, 2005, 2006. He has a pile of ebooks on this CD, MP3 CD, CD. And then he said, go learn, do your thing. And this is why I use glasses now. So I would go in 7 a.m. and leave at 9 because there was no light in that particular room, and I would be looking at the screen, testing HTML back in the day. So on one hand, yes, my background was in the education, but the failure of the education system created that resilience in me to learn things by myself. I didn't just wake up and build the app. So I think I can separate the action into 2 levels. First of all, it was simple action. So before I started the app, I began distributing food to indigent kids, street kids, with some of my friends every Valentine's Day, basically. And after a while, we realized that there was this guy who had a supermarket close by, and I walked in there and, I saw them throwing out stuff. So I said, hey, how about you give it to us just before the day reaches, rather than throw it away? And he was so nice. He started giving us cereal, pasta, little things like that just before it expires. And then we would cook it and give it to the kids. But then I just simply decided to automate all of that. So that's the simple action. The more entrepreneurial action is that I wanted to know, does the market really need this? It's called value proposition testing. So I went into supermarkets and shops, and I spoke to the manager. Do you have products that are expiring? And they said, well, no, we don't need that. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Because there's this agency in Nigeria called NAFDAC that goes around to make sure things that are expired are not on the shelf. So maybe they thought I was a spy of some sort. So I quietly went through the aisle, and then I saw tuna fish. This was February 2014, about the 28th of February. And it was expiring on the 7th of March. And I pulled it out of the shelf, and I said, hey, look, you have this thing, is expiring. And they were like, oh, wow. Where did you find it? So I said, how did you? I said, it's right on your shelf. So that was how I knew Number one, they don't know, they're not diligent enough, the stock rotation is not efficient enough to identify these things. And the second level, when I kept going back to them, let's sign a partnership, they said, we're still not very sure. So one day I went in, I said, they had this shelf where they keep all the products about to expire. I said, I can clear this shelf off your aisle of expiring goods in 1 week. Oh, he said, really? And then he took me up to the manager. And that's how I began to have some of the partnerships with the shop. Yeah, so this was, it's really rudimentary. It's really, you have to go in there, break away from the fear, jump in the wild ocean. Don't wait for people to hand you $100,000 or capital to start. Create the value. The universe responds to value.
Yes. Love it. The universe responds to the value. Well done, Katindi.
Mine is simple. I went in having done international relations, and I went into this economic research and policy analysis firm. So literally, I was starting to learn about economics research in my place of work. And so I worked there, and that's how I gained knowledge. I had very good bosses, and I pretty much did all the work they expected me to do. I took on extra jobs without expecting any pay. One of the ones I remember is we're supposed to do the dissemination of the scenario stories I told you in the northern part of the country. It took 3 days by road, and it would take like maybe about 6 hours maybe on flight. And we were supposed to take cut. Cut is mirror. I don't know if that is one of those, I don't know. Whether you have it here, you chew it a lot. And cut, yes. We were supposed to take one of those flights. And we got to the airport, and the guy hiked the price from $2,000 to, I think, like some ridiculous, no, $200 to about maybe $1,000. So I just thought, okay, this is not working. My colleague refused to go. I took the truck. So I didn't know what I was signing up for. But I said, it's work that has to be done. There's a truck to go. We are going. So I did that. And so through that mentorship, my bosses really got interested in training me, because and that's the other thing that maybe is coming across, is that you must be willing to put in the time. A lot of times we want to reap the benefits of getting those high profits without putting in the time. So anyhow, through that, my boss then paid, there was this one of those grants we got that allowed for training. So I was taken to Oxford University to learn scenarios planning. And then I was attached to the lady who helped us do the scenarios planning. So that's how I've built my capacity. I'm now doing a doctorate in foresight because I'm getting more work in governments and in organizations. So building capacity through and through, and understudying under someone whose experience I think is important.
Yeah, having good mentors.
Yeah,
brilliant. And I think putting in the time, I mean, we keep hearing it over and over again. It seems like you have to prove yourself first before people will take you seriously. You have to produce a prototype before somebody might take that up and finance it. Brenda, I want to come back to you. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about your success now and tell us where you are now.
2 years later, we have a product, at least, which was the most difficult thing to do. But we started seriously selling the eyewear about a year ago, yeah? And even then, we used to have, and we still do once in a while, we have eye camps. So we go to schools that children usually do not have maybe money to afford such services. So we go with optometrists, we test them, and then we give them eyeglasses for free. However, this money initially came from grants, individuals, organizations, but now it's the glasses that we sell subsidize for the kids. So those that we know completely cannot afford, because their parents have bigger problems. They have problems of food. So eyeglasses is really not up there on the top of their list. Yeah. So far we've done over 5,000 tests for children in schools. Yeah. We've sold more than 700 pairs of glasses in Uganda alone, and have recently started shipping to Rwanda. So we hope that we'll continue to grow. But recent...
I think a round of applause again.
Thank you. Yeah, so we are working on sending to other countries, but Rwanda first. And then of recent, because again, it's for me, it's opportunity fixing the challenge, and we have the technology. So recently, the way eyewear works is that as a market itself is, George will come and buy a pair of glasses. He absolutely loves them. He's enjoying them. He will tell all his friends, but George is not going to come back. You know why? It's eyeglasses. It's not that he doesn't want to come back, but that's the nature of the business. Customer retention is very low, and yet customer acquisition cost is very high. Okay? So we decided to diversify in terms of product so that we could also still create. So we have actually now started doing construction material, paving tiles, building blocks, using recycled plastic. Why? When one person comes to buy for 200 square meters, okay, they're going to buy at least 7,000 pieces of a paver. So I know that even if that person doesn't come back, we're good, yeah? Yeah, so I'm trying to sort of like balance the math in a way. So that's how much we have. So we've diversified by product, we've grown out of the country, and we do have 2 products now.
Diversify. Reinvent. Wonderful. Oscar.
Okay, so yeah, for us, it's been quite a journey. We have, first of all, we have a working product. We have the engineering. I basically have 3 departments mainly: the engineering, the business development, and then the social side of things, where we actually track our impact and deliver that impact to the people that we want to reach. So far, like I mentioned, in the past year, we've reached 50,000 households with affordable nutrition. We started this campaign to reach another 50,000 before World Food Day and have distributed over 5,000 plus packs, healthy meal packs already. Our journey was really pushed through a grant from the International Telecoms Union, which was a $5,000 grant in 2013, which actually helped us build the first real prototype. And then entrepreneurship is a journey. There was this little challenging break between 2014 and 2016 where things were really hard, where I almost gave up. I almost decided to go back into paid employment. But your vision has to be really strong. And you really have to ask yourself, what do you want to do with your life? What kind of value do you want to bring, to the world that we live in? So another wonderful thing happened in 2016 where we won the Rolex Award for Enterprise and got a 50,000 Swiss francs.
Wow.
50,000 Swiss francs prize money, which I invested into the actual business. And it's been so wonderful from then on. And we've built so many other partnerships, expanded our team, got over 35 partner retailers working with us. And it's just been a tremendous journey so far. And we're happy for where we are at the moment.
So, Katindi.
So that's impact?
Impact. Where are you now in terms of success?
All right. I'll say that for me, just seeing the kind of impact our work has had has been tremendous. So I'll just give you an example of what this work has produced. In my country, and George has been at the forefront of those clamoring for or advocating for youth policies, this work helped inform that and complete that process because there wasn't any comprehensive research on youth. Everybody was advocating, but they didn't have material to prove it, or they didn't even have what could happen without those policies. So this work just provided that evidence, and they picked it up, and within no time, the policies were made. For me, the biggest has been that the youth budget actually increased 6 times. 6 times, guys. That's a huge budget allocation. Okay, that's the good part of the story. The bad part is that they stole the money after allocating it. All right? And then, so they started this project on National Youth Service because they realized, so first of all, our work gave people language, policy language. And every politician that came, actually 2013 and 2017, everybody was saying, oh, youth bulge this, youth bulge that. And this work actually gave them that language. Then part of the promises was that we're going to allocate more money to tackle unemployment. So there was money given to National Youth Service, which was revived, and the Youth Fund to start small businesses. Those have their challenges, but it's still a win in that regard. Then for me, I think seeing government organization begin to institutionalize foresight thinking is really a plus for us. The Electoral Commission had its challenges last year, but they actually did scenarios before the elections to see what they were up against in terms of looking at when they're running the elections. That had its challenges, but that's a beautiful thing. So those have been interesting sort of like milestones for us. Organizations now, I've done several foresight exercises. One of them was with civil society, and one of the trends we were seeing is that donor funding, guys, is drying up. And I started telling these organizations, just out of that research, before 3-5 years back or 4 years back, and everyone was like, oh, we are important, we do governance, government doesn't have its act together, we are going to get this funding. Until some of them started locking the doors because there was actually no funding. And those trends, people are now beginning to use that for strategic planning processes. So the business is expanding, and that's a good thing. But for me, the institutionalization of foresight thinking is something that Africa needs. And that's what we have to do. And part of my recommendation for this summit is that as you think about arts and culture, think about how does it interface with technology and other things, but what are the implications for the future? What is going to be the dressing in the future? It could be that there's an opportunity there for young artists to look at, fashion and recycling. That's an interesting opportunity. How does technology help that? And that interface is what is going to be exciting. It's not just painting. And I'm not undermining that. I'm just saying it has to be cross-sectional. It has to look forward, and that's where the innovation is.
Great. Katindi, you have just led in very, very well to talk about Oscar's next big project. And again, talking about reinvention and talking about never stopping. I mean, these three are unstoppable. They are just... So, Oscar, you've been grappling with this idea as well, the intersection between arts and technology. What have you done about it?
Okay, yeah, first of all, I did have some kind of arts background until, of course, there's a view growing up. There was this view that if you had to choose the art, maybe you're not really going to be so successful in the future. So the better students always went towards science, but that was actually very wrong because, you have great artists now, you have wonderful people doing art. So back in the day, I used to do sculpture on wood. I sketched a little piano player, use a saw, spray sawdust on it, do paper mache and all of that. So I do have an arts background, which brings me to my next project. Can I have the slides once again? Yes, it's called Gallery of Code. And what Gallery of Code is, it's a research and creativity lab that combines arts, technology, and the society, and of course science, at that intersection and how it affects the society, of course. So we want to know what can come out from this connection, from this interdisciplinary approach to creativity. Hence, we now have Gallery of Code, which is a partnership with ASSA2018. ASSA2018 is based in Austria, and they're one of the largest cultural, artistic, and technology institute. And they were wonderful enough to partner with us to build this research lab supported by the government of Austria. And we've been having several workshops. So this is our first cohort, by the way. I called it the Inventors Fellowship. And we have animators in there. we have two animators, actually. One is a 2D animator, one is a 3D animator from the arts. And then we blended them with engineers, software engineers. We have a social entrepreneur there. And that's the senior director of Ars Electronica Future Lab, who actually visited just before I came from the 21st, no, not the 21st, from the 17th of August. And I just left him. He just left us recently. So this was all last week. I think I've mixed up the dates. This was last week, basically, just before I came here. And really wonderful projects are coming out of that. We're seeing people animating cultural... one of the guys that I told him, why don't you look at doing a 3D animation of our local masquerade? There's a local masquerade from the part of Nigeria called the Eyo Masquerade. They wear those masquerades and they dance out. So why don't you do a story about that? And he's doing a wonderful story, connecting it to peace building, and it's a really wonderful mix. And wonderful projects are also coming out of that. I just wanted to add one other thing as an opportunity from the Rolex network that I belong to. It's called the Rolex Artists and Proteges Program. If there are any artists here who want to take advantage of that, you can Google that. It's a wonderful program that gives artists some kind of fellowship for a whole year to work with that. And of course, Gallery of Code, we are open to welcoming artists who want to collaborate in the continent with people down there in Nigeria and create wonderful projects together.
That's wonderful. Well done. Okay, very, very quickly. Have you got some burning questions that you want to ask our three?
I've been asked to make a structural question. I don't have a structural question. It's a comment. I'm really impressed by the kind of conversations that we're having. What is clear to me is that there's a lot of multidisciplinary interpretation of arts application going into the future. Because earlier in the morning, there was a conversation about going way back into the past. And for a moment, I felt that we were stuck in our nostalgia. But then this conversation also takes us into the future. And I guess maybe this is the connection between reaching back into our archives, but also living into the future. I'm so inspired by the multidisciplinary approach for these creative enterprises, but also that are creating social value that's changing lives, that is affecting how we see ourselves and how we locate ourselves in our cities. So I'm feeling really inspired, and I want to just say that. Thank you.
Okay. Patrick, and then the gentleman at the back, and then this gentleman here.
Short question. So obviously our theme is here, human creativity, and I think a lot of your stories speak to that. So can you talk us a little about maybe, the impact that it's had economically, socially, and then culturally, just to tie it back to the theme, because this is, I think, the living example of what we're trying to aspire. So it's not like a futuristic goal. You've already been doing it. How do we strengthen it? How do we scale it? How do we sustain it?
Okay. Did anyone about the presenters went through the bureaucracy of certifications, registering, PTY, business? And also, did anyone get an award for those good efforts you have done in your home country?
I just want to say congratulations to everyone. You're doing such great things. My name is Julia. I'm coming all the way from Zambia. I have a question for Brenda, which is, I like your idea of the eyeglasses, but maybe this is more of a statement. Is it possible that you can make it more local, going back to our traditions? Being in this global market, if somebody sees it, they probably think it's from somewhere else, apart from Africa. So how do you make it more African, Ugandan, to be specific? And then a question to all of you. How do any of you use traditions in your countries within your products and what you're doing? And do you get any support from the government? Thank you.
Okay, and the gentleman here who's been patient. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ashwin Berry. Some of you might have known I was a comedian just yesterday. The day before that, I was an MC, and I'm a theater director, theater actor. I'm a performer, and I create platforms for expression. Thank you very much. I just wanted to, first of all, to mainly the two ladies. First of all, so I love everything you're doing. Thank you. Because naturally I'm an artist, I don't like to exclude society when I talk about the struggles you'd have gone through. And you are two black women. And in the experiences of black women, there's a lot of opposition made to you specifically for that. I would like to know that's how you, if there was sexism, which I anticipate there was, how did you deal with that, and how did it affect your enterprise? And just to bring it back, I don't hate to do this. I have, whenever we take talks and we're given context, we need to be able to appreciate context from wherever it's given. I feel like Tate Sem gave us context here, and to pretend that the results of what happened aren't a big part of who we are and how we create and how we navigate these spaces would be ignorant on our part to say archive. Yes, we are absolutely creating the future with new ideas, but if we discard the past over there, it's very likely we're going to enter a path that's not even our own, and hence we won't even be able to define and create unique ideas, because as we are standing right now, I'm more likely to create a unique idea. For you, everyone over here finds me more receptive because of my accent. I'm more likely to create a unique idea from a Eurocentric place. And so, as someone who feels that, yes, I want to be a global citizen, I don't feel that it's proper for us to continue to shun what it was as if we have been free longer than we were captives in the last 50, 60, 100 years. So to pretend like that doesn't have eternal effects, to me, is folly. But ladies, about the sexism, and I just want to say thank you so much for inspiring me.
Right. Okay, and?
Quick question, follow-up, almost. There are some very Eurocentric words that find their way into our sector, and we certainly debate them quite a lot. So how do you define yourselves? Because this is really important. The word entrepreneurship, the word entrepreneur, these are not words that are located here necessarily in Africa. They've been given to Africa. And now there is this very sexy thing that's going on, which is the social and creative entrepreneurship, which a lot of money is being thrown at from all over the world. So it would be really great to know, how do you define yourself in terms of the work that you do? Thank you.
Okay, one more question from over here, and then we'll ask for a response.
That's the last one, this one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is to Brenda. Molding plastic. How did you get the molder right? I'm very interested in that.
Maybe that's a conversation you can have directly afterwards, because it's more technical. But, Makariko, I'm going to allow you one last question. Just because you are who you are and you've worked so hard for this summit. So,
I'm so inspired. I think if there is one thing that is very important to me, is to inspire our youth to look at the gaps in our societies and see how we can fill them. But maybe it was just really to talk about a couple of maybe months, maybe weeks, I can't even remember correctly. Old Mutual invited an Ethiopian entrepreneur called Bethlehem Alemu, who has created the Soul Rebels. And she is an accountant by profession. And she took 3 years to learn how to make shoes because she decided she's going to find gaps in her society. Ethiopia is big on leather, and they have a lot of discarded old tires. And that's how she started. Today she's sitting with shops in Europe, in America, and she's basically traveling the world telling her story. And she talked very much about looking at the things that we have. Namibia has leather. We have leather. We have jewels as well, or precious stones. Why aren't we creating businesses looking at what it is that we have as resources? So I'm very, very inspired when I meet young people that have decided they are going to think out of the box and they are going to stand up and basically fill even just one gap in that society. So thank you so much for inspiring me.
Okay, so I'm going to give you one last challenge as well. I'd like you to try to answer those questions, but then maybe wrap up with one piece of advice for our people out there. What would be the one thing that you think, oh, you know, this helped me?
All right, I'll go fast. Thanks so much for all those very challenging questions. But somebody asked, did you experience bureaucracy in Uganda? I think just like a lot of African countries, you have some money, it is 2 days. You have a little bit less money, it's 10 days. A little non-money, 2 months. So that was my situation. I had a little bit of money, so it took me about 2 months to register my company and get everything in order. So bureaucracy also, unfortunately for us, depends on the depth of your pocket. And that's something we need to think about. Can I make them more local? And this is another challenge that I really, really wanted to highlight. So I unfortunately did not show you the very first piece of glasses that we made. It was as localized and as African as we could imagine. The artist didn't want to do anything similar to what's out there. He was very excited about the possibility of making it as authentic, as African as possible. And guess what happened when we went to the market? Nobody liked it. They said, you know, this is trash. I cannot wear this. This is, what's with all these African things on the sides? I'm not going to wear them on my face. True story. And I mean, I've had conversations, I cannot watch Ugandan movies because the accent is so poor. You know, we need a little bit of Tom Cruise in there, you know? And that's the reality of my business. So I had to quickly, because I'm in business, at the end of the day, I need to make money. And I went back and said, okay, what's the real reason I'm doing this? I need to cut the cost of my glasses. So I had to adjust and when I changed, like, this one looks like a Ray-Ban. And then they were wearing it. It's the truth. And that's my challenge. I'm finding it very difficult to balance those two.
Maybe you artists can start wearing the glasses and make them popular.
Yeah, I think maybe I need to also look into a different
influence. Yeah, we need influencers.
A different market, yes. Yeah, and that's the challenge for me, because as a business person, I'm thinking, okay, this is my purpose, this is what I need to do, and this is what I need to deliver now. And then in the future, then we can look at, because it's also very expensive to create a mold. It costs us $3,000 to $5,000 to create one mold. So for us to play around and not make any money out of it, for me, it wouldn't make business sense. So that's why they look the way they look. But thank you for the question. I think in the future, we should be able to see some cool stuff. Did I get any support from government? Absolutely not. And again, I think I don't want to encourage reliance on government. Like he said, you know, if you have the money, you can start, yeah? Or even if you don't have, but you have the idea. I mean, there's people who, an artist who just believes in your vision and wants to create the designs for you for free. Or just, can you give away some equity to some people, some experts who are able to help you just to get your idea off the ground? You know, sometimes you feel, I need to own 100% of my business. No, you do not. You need to get your idea off the ground. So no, absolutely no government money at all. Any challenges being a woman every time. So I've had lots of conversations, especially when I ventured slightly into the construction space. So here you're talking to men, and it's heavily dominated by men. And I'll narrate to you my experience. I walk into this guy's office, I tell him, look, we have some really cool stuff. It's in my car. My car is full. I want to show you. And I'm like, okay, tell me about it. And then I sit down. And usually when you go to meet these people, you're dressed well, professionally, decently, but well. And, we talk, and then after he's looking at you, but what do you know about construction? I said, well, I've done my research, and I can tell you my product is 7 times stronger than your concrete stuff. I can tell you that your concrete stuff will take in water, my plastic stuff won't. So I can guarantee you 10 years, your concrete thing will give me 5 years. I said, no, that's not possible. You're a woman. Okay? And after we've been doing back and forth, I was like, oh, by the way, so are you free for dinner on Friday? and this is my reality. And it wasn't the first time. And even while I was employed as a consultant, it was happening. So these are challenges sometimes, and it's painful because you're trying to get business here and somebody is looking at you as potential snack for dinner. So the other thing I need, and I'll be quick here, is some of the things that women struggle with do not actually come from outside. They come from inside. I will tell you, and where I come from, our culture is very strong when it comes to women. We're taught to sit right. We are taught to speak little. Do not express yourself too much, or else you're not marriage material. Do not. And slowly we start, I think it's called the imposter syndrome. When they ask a man who is maybe, let's imagine a man in my place. So, tell us about, oh my goodness, my product. Ooh, even if he's not doing nothing. And then you tell a woman, so tell us about your product. You see, anyway, I have come this far, but I'm trying to, you understand? Because every time you feel like you're just not good enough. And it comes from inside. And I think we need to believe in ourselves. We need to believe in what we're doing. Because even if they empower you as much as they can, if you don't believe it, you're never going to get off the ground. Quickly, the last question. How do you define yourself? Yeah, social entrepreneurship. Those are really cool terms, buzzwords. They make us look cool. And this is what I want to conclude with what's my message for the day. What's your purpose? For me, it's purpose, opportunity, impact. Purpose in the sense, why are you doing what you're doing? There has to be something more than just money or recognition or awards or something. That's why she managed to do 3 years teaching herself how to make shoes. Yeah? If you don't have purpose, my friend, 1 month you're like, man, these things are hard. I need to, you cannot stick it in if you don't have purpose. She knew that she was made for that, and that's what she wanted to do. The second thing, opportunity. How do you identify opportunity? Sometimes we are comfortable. Oh, we are creatives. Things are going to come to us. My art is good. My music is good. Yeah, I'll post it on YouTube. But then I think you've seen the whole Kiki challenge. Kiki, do you? Right? Somebody has tapped into the whole viral thing, the challenge thing, to make money. I didn't know Kiki, and then I was thinking, okay, who's this? What's all this? But every time I watch something, he's making money. You understand? So you need to identify opportunities to market yourself, opportunities to be in the right place at the right time. Because you just have to identify where the gap is, what the opportunity is, and strike. And thirdly, impact. How impactful is your work? If it's only helping you, maybe you need to find out more about what it is really that you want to do. So those are my closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Oscar, have you been invited out to dinner?
No. I'm a good guy. I'm a good guy. No. Yeah, well, I just wanted to run through the questions. First of all, Patrick's question. He said, how do we scale? How do we sustain these things? I think the first thing is we should have a problem-solving mentality first. Now, once we have that problem-solving mentality, we begin to recognize opportunities around us. Because we have so many challenges on the continent. And it's seeking and asking for people who are willing to take them on. And I feel a certain kind of way when I see some of the most successful businesses solving problems in Africa pioneered by people from outside, pioneered from people from Europe. I mean, I was once approached by a particular organization, I wouldn't mention their name. They said, oh, we read about you, want to support you. And I went on their website, and then I saw most of the people they support are MIT graduates, Harvard so-and-so, came to Africa, came to Kenya, I'm like, what, are they no people on the ground solving these problems? The answer is there is, but they are not getting access to the quality financing that they should get. We need to begin to look out for alternative sources of financing. And this is a conversation I was having with George. You see, the guy who has the money dictates the pace. Until we begin to get our local monarchs, the chief of Windec, to say, hey, create $1 million fund. You have so much money. How can you support our entrepreneurs? That has to change. As long as the venture capitalists from Europe, from America, so-and-so fund, MacArthur, this, that, this is what's going to happen. So we need to find alternative sources of financing. That's how we can scale it. That's how we can sustain it. And then this also is vital because that's a way to reduce our reliance on aid. Social entrepreneurship, people like Brenda solving real problems. You don't have to ask so-and-so agency to come and, oh, please help us, we're dying. That rhetoric needs to change. That narrative needs to change. The gentleman also asked, did you get an award from your country? Well, absolutely not. In fact, in the earlier days, I used to try to reach out to government, but they just don't care. They're busy with the politics. And I really don't blame them. So to answer your question, no award, no support. I haven't gotten any money from the government or anything whatsoever. It's mainly people who believe in the vision. Okay. So support for government. And then the next thing is, how do I define myself? How do I define myself? I define myself as a value creator, first of all. Because I believe success is impacting your world with the investment of your personality. How can you add value to the people around you? How can you add value to your community? If you're not adding value, there's a problem. So that's really how I see myself. The social entrepreneurship, whatever it is, it all comes from that need, from that desire, rather, of creating real value that everyone else can benefit from. And it's been innate in me. When I was young, I remember making a fan from a beverage tin. I cut a beverage tin because, of course, we have a lot of power cuts. I think I was 9 at the time. A lot of light taken, power cut, no fan. The place is so hot. So I said, hey, why don't I make a little fan that my sisters and brothers can blow at night? And I cut this little tin into the blades. I took a rotor, the turning one, from an old Crown radio, the radio cassette player, and that was the fan. So within me, that's who I am, to answer your question. Finally, my last words to round up. I just wanted to share one strong principle that I believe in. I call it the loose hanging fruit principle, not the low hanging fruit principle. Because low is low. If you can't reach it, you can't reach it. But loose, at least you can shake the tree and it comes down. What does it say? It's divided into 3. Number 1, what skills do you readily have? You don't need to ask for $100,000. What skills do you readily have? Can you market? Can you program? Can you code? Can you draw? Can you make hair? Whatever you can. If you already have it, it's ticked. First thing. Number 2, who are the people beside you that you can speak to that can bring it to life? Is it your brother, your closest friend? How can they help you? And the final thing is, how accessible is the market to you? How easy is it to access that market? Do you need to raise a market budget to access that market? Or can you sell to the next guy that lives next to you? So that's the loose hanging principle. And to close, I was just going to say that problems are all around us. We need to start seeing problems as opportunity. Once we begin to see them as opportunity, we begin to create value and benefit from it. Thank you.
Big round of applause. Katindi.
So just to answer Patrick's question about finance, from where I'm sitting and looking at future trends, one of the things I see is that, or what I at least deduced for myself, and that's why I chose to register a business as a private company instead of a company limited by guarantee, was that funding is drying up. And actually, when you look at the donor terrain, in my country at least, and I suspect it's the same in Africa, is that they're actually preferring now to do their own work or hire consultants to do the work, but not give money through institutions. Because if you think about it, so if they give scenarios work to, like where I used to work, they will still give me the work as a consultant, but they will charge them rent, administration fees, and so forth. So they've decided to cut that middle organization and then hire me to give me that work. So my sense is that as you think about, particularly artists in the room, as you think about how to move forward in terms of the work you do, thinking very critically about how you register your entity is very important, because that has consequences. And I think I'm answering two questions together. So how do you finance it? For me, I say that I needed to integrate subjects or disciplines and, in a sense, value create and create a product that people are willing to pay for. So they may not be willing, for example, to pay for a painting, but you can use that skill integrated with something else and it can make you money. So how do you integrate and try and look at it from the value add perspective? In terms of sustainability, I think there's value in going against the grain. A lot of times we hide under, oh, this is the dominant narrative, and we don't create counter-narratives. And what we don't realize is that those counter-narratives, if you're persistent, if it's good, it eventually becomes the narrative. And pioneers actually get rewarded for being pioneers of ideas. So I think there's value in going against the grain. It's hard work, it takes time, but you have, again, like Brenda said, and Oscar, there's value in that as well if you believe in the idea. The other thing I wanted to say about that question on sustainability is that the future world is predicated on learning, on innovation, and adaptability. And if you're in your work and in your business, you're not considering those three factors, you're not constantly learning, unlearning, and relearning, if you're not innovating, if you're not adapting, you're not going to go anywhere. And one of the things I think that has come out is that artists sometimes can be very static with their ideas and can live in their own islands and decide, I am good no matter what you say. Now, if the rest of the people are saying you're not good, you might want to change your perspective. All right? And so adaptability is so important because, by the way, you can still come back to the same thing just using a different route. Okay, so that sustainability in that regard is very important. Then I think in this room, one of the things I kept hearing was, are you coming to show me the card for 5 minutes? Okay. So what I kept hearing was, let's create a conducive environment for creative policies. But from my work, one of the things that is showing and that is very powerful is that the creative sector can impact other policies. And that's an area of opportunity. And if you just see it as a two-sided coin in that regard, there's massive opportunity there. In terms of bureaucracy of registering, I think I mentioned already that the choice of company or the choice of how you register makes a difference. A private company, they'll register you quickly because they want to start taxing you quickly. If it's a trust, because they want to, negotiate charity, they have to take you to NIS and all this. So it becomes more difficult and, the complexities of that. Support from the government, I haven't received any support, but interestingly, there has been a lot of requests to partner with government. And I remember when they were doing their Vision 2030, again, because of all this research and so forth, they said, come and do for us a chapter on youth. This is how they view youth, women, and children. That guy who was giving us work said, oh, you look like the youngest in this room. Just take youth, women, because so they stop making so much noise. We need to raise the bar on that on just the perception on youth. But partnerships have been interesting. On the issue of sexism, obviously, working in the policy space is very interesting. Every politician wants a third wife, and anyone in a skirt or a trouser that has a female figure is a potential candidate. So, in that regard, I think one of the things that has helped is just being an authority in my field. I've published a lot, and that gives you respect. I'll tell you something small. When you're short and slim, people don't give you as much respect in the first 2 seconds of your presentation. Like when you're male, bigger, and you know all that. And so you really need to prove yourself. You need to know your stuff. So professionalism, being able to be an authority in your field is important, and that helps navigate those spaces. They say that good girls don't get the corner office, so we have to also change the language, and I think Brenda spoke to that. You have to change the language in which people speak with you, and those rules and those boundaries have to be established in the first 2 seconds of meeting. It doesn't mean you become rude. It just means that by the time those 2 seconds are over, they need to look at you and think, we are talking to a peer, we are talking to someone we can respect. In terms of how do I define myself, I see myself as a foresight practitioner. In South Africa, we have a lot of foresight work going on, but in the rest of Africa, it's very limited. And so for me, that's my purpose, to make sure that people begin to think about the future, how it impacts the present, what are the strategies they are going to use to navigate those complexities in the future. Thank you.
Wow. Can I just have a quick raise of hands? How many of you have a creative idea? An idea. Look at all those ideas. Wow. Okay, so I hope this panel has done something to inspire you to keep those ideas, not in a notebook, but to share them, to talk with other people, to find the partners that you need to help you bring those to fruition. Find your sense of purpose. That's what I was hearing. Find your sense of purpose and then do your research. Get your facts and your figures right. Are you really needed? Are you going to be successful with this? And then find the opportunity out there. Put in the time. Keep your eye on the goal. Diversify. Reinvent if necessary. Yeah, constantly strive to be better. And keep your place, your roots, and your respect intact. So I think those are really, really good pieces of advice. I thank you very much, my 3 panelists. It's no wonder they're successful. And let's give them a really, really big final round of applause.